Great question. I mean, we have a great group of people right now in my office. Just as an example, yesterday you had a great group with Brian Danielson, Mike Mansouri, Will Washington, Jimmy Jacobs, Sanjay Dutt, Sarah Stock, and Dean Malenko, and several others that were in my office throughout the day at various points. And Brian had his match, and people were in and out. I think everybody had great points, and there were a number of other people. But I did come in with a lot of it, and I think we've been on an incredible run of shows. And this is a great, this wasn't quite the setup I was looking for, so I'll see if I still get it. But I'm very excited to talk about the science of the booking. And I think in particular, recently we've had some of our best shows we've ever done. And this year, if you look at 2023, and, just to use as samples, you can look at fan feedback from different shows. One site that measures fan feedback is Cage Match. Look at the top 100 shows this year and look at how many of them are from AEW. And if you throw this version of ROH in there too, you get some more. But it's pretty incredible. And the top 100 shows that have over 50 votes, top 100 shows even more so that have over 100 votes. Look at those and look at how many of them happened in 2023 from AEW or even a couple more from ROH. And that speaks pretty highly, I thought. But much more so, I would talk TV ratings. And I'm really excited about the lift in collision ratings we've seen as the competition has continued to increase. We've seen historically that nothing takes a toll on wrestling ratings more so than the most powerful media empire in the world, that is the National Football League. The NFL, I speak from experience and from within the beast, that it is the most powerful and most efficient and best run media operation in the world. And the NFL in recent weeks has taken the top dozen spots or more on cable on Saturday, just the NFL. And yet the collision ratings have continued to increase. And I do think there is a science behind this methodology, and I do think they've been probably the strongest set of shows we've ever done consecutively. And I think there's a great team, but also I personally have never felt more invigorated and on top of the booking. There's a great group of people on Saturdays and Wednesdays, and that was a good sample of people that were there. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple people. And then there's people that weren't there that, might be there on a Saturday. But there was a lot of people throughout the day that would come in and contribute an idea. Certainly, I felt coming in really prepared in recent weeks. Something I've really enjoyed has been the Continental Classic. And again, you didn't give me the perfect setup to talk about this stuff. So I might come back to it, but I've been conducting some pretty experimental booking, and I've really enjoyed the science of it, and I can break down the science of it going into World's End and why I think there's a lot to learn from it. And I think I might as well, now that I've popped the can off it, I'll just keep talking. So I think it's really interesting because when you do an experiment, there's an experimental group and a control group. And for me, the control was everything we had been doing. And I took basically the things I've been doing and tried to keep them consistent. And then began doing the experiment that was the Continental Classic. And the nature of it is a very sports-based presentation. And it has some changes from the G1, for example, which in this case, I would say the scoring system of 3 points for a win versus 2 makes it a very different incentive to go for the wins. And also, I think the biggest difference possibly is nobody allowed at ringside and no outside interference. And that's probably a misconception from people who don't actually watch the G1 because there has been outside interference. And I think that was something we did to make it different. And then when I look at the tournament itself and executing it, it's the most fun I've ever had working on something. I love working on the Continental Classic, and I think It's been so tremendous and such a highlight of the holidays. For me, it really put a smile on my face on Christmas, going back and watching some of it with my family. And I think being able to watch the very best of AEW and show them what we're doing. And for the Continental Classic final this weekend, I think Eddie Kingston and Jon Moxley, there's so much story between the two men. And I thought the face-to-face segment at the end of the Bryan Danielson Eddie Kingston match, which many people felt was the culmination of the entire tournament so far, the best match yet, it was tremendous. So when you do an experiment, you have an experimental group and a control group. If the control is what we've been doing and the things that have been on AEW and what we're doing, the experiment was increasing the allocation of this very meat and potatoes, sports-based, old-school pro wrestling at its finest, in my opinion, Continental Classic. And the experiment, I think, has been very successful, and it has yielded really interesting results. And one thing I would point to in particular is that ratings increase on Collision, because Collision probably leaned into being a bit more sports-based presentation to begin with. And now with the additional Continental Classic content, I think what we've been able to do and what I focused on with the booking of Collision, that I think has probably been the best set of shows we've ever had and has really yielded positive, tangible results on paper that I can show now with the ratings increases in the recent weeks, despite the competition getting much harder, because there is, unlike other shows, there's no history of Collision, not only year over year, because this is the first year, but then there's no history of Collision versus the NFL. So you can't really go back and look at what the NFL has done to Collision before, because there's never been Saturday NFL competition versus Collision in this being the first year. What we've seen is we were able to boost the ratings against the toughest competition of the year, which, if you look at the history of the NFL and wrestling, that's really hard to do. That's how good these shows were. That's how successful this experiment was. That's how strongly I feel about what we've done with the Continental Classic. And going forward, will this affect the presentation, and will I book the shows more sports-based presentation and accept the fan feedback, which is very tangible and real? Yes, absolutely. And that is why this has been such a great experiment. And the results are there. They are tangible. There's been, as I've said, an experimental group and a control group. The experiment increasing the allocation of real quality pro wrestling. And by the way, then in doing so on Collision, a show that was already really wrestling focused anyway, I've also been able to make that show, in my opinion, the tightest, strongest set of shows we've ever done. And throughout Dynamite and Collision, I think there's been some really great things. There's great storytelling outside of the Continental Classic. I'm really excited about the world title matches. I think for people, that it really want to see larger than life characters, there's great things to be said for what's happening with the Devil. Certainly Samoa Joe and MJF are two of the greatest wrestlers in the world. And I think to have a world title match like MJF versus Samoa Joe, and for them to be able to tell a story, I think it's really exciting. And that has lived outside of this great sports-based presentation we've done. And certainly Timeless Toni Storm has built herself into an amazing character. I've loved working on it. It feels like a lifetime ago, and honestly, it was a really long time ago. It was right before I first started talking to Mariah, and it took a long time to get her visa done. So this is many, many months ago. I first went to Toni Storm and talked to her about a changing character, and watching some films from the 50s, and she sunk her teeth into it more than anybody's ever sunk their teeth into something. She talk about a perfect fit for somebody, and she has taken the ball and run with it unlike anyone I've ever seen. And Timeless Toni Storm has been amazing, but she really, when you look back at AEW now and what I'm talking about, somebody who has had some of the best matches, and certainly to get the best pro wrestling week to week, I think somebody that can go out there and from the very first Dynamite not only have great matches, but we've also seen somebody that delivers ratings is Riho. So I think it's a very fascinating matchup, in particular with, of course, by design, Riho got taken out by Ruby, Saraya, and Tony, and has come back for revenge, and she's gotten revenge on Ruby and Soraya. And I joke to all the women, I think this really reminds me of Kill Bill, because it's like they all put this woman down and she's come back for revenge, and this group, they don't even like each other, the individual people anymore. Like, Tony's not even friends with them anymore, and they're fighting with each other. And like, yet they all have that in common, that, Rio was coming for all of them. I think I've really enjoyed working with them, and in particular, and certainly speaking of these big characters, and the House of Black and Julia Hart is the TBS champion, and Abaddon. So there's a lot of interesting things going on outside of the Continental Classic, and the focus on women's wrestling is very by design. I've been really trying to put an emphasis on more stories, and because everybody's been stepping up, and it's time, and we have a great group that I've been trying to build, and we've had a lot of injuries. It's really challenging for a wrestling promotion. It doesn't get talked about enough. When you have people like Kenny Omega, Adam Cole, Pac on the men's side just to get started, I mean, I think it could cripple a wrestling company, pretty much any. I think it could cripple most wrestling companies when you say on the men's side you're going to lose Kenny Omega, Adam Cole, and Pac, and then Jamie Hayter, Britt Baker, and Thunder Rosa on the women's side. I mean, certainly, for us a few years ago in the pandemic era, something like that would have completely crippled the company to lose that volume of stars. Yet, time after time, AEW wrestlers have stepped up, and mentioning those names in the women's division, it was great to get Thunder Rosa back again, part of the great Collision show this past week that delivered a really strong number that's been up week after week after week, despite the competition only getting harder and harder with the NFL stepping in. And the women's division has really leveled up, and I'm really excited about what they're doing. And so there's just a lot of things going on. So to answer your question, I feel like more all over it than ever. I think the experiments we've been doing are working, and I have a better sense of where to go and what to do going into 2024 than I ever have before. Thank you.